I'm Ryan. I'm the head painter and artist at Counts Custom. I really love to work on motorcycles. Ever since I was knee-high, I loved two-wheel.
Ryan Evans wasn't just another face on a reality show. He was the guy who could take an old, forgotten car and make it look like it belonged in a museum. For nearly a decade, fans of counting cars watched him spray, pinstripe, and transform metal into art. But once the cameras stopped rolling, the rumors started. Some say he walked away from it all. Others whisper about scandals, and a few even claim tragedy struck. So, what's the real story? In this video, we're digging into the mystery behind Ryan's life after the spotlight, separating fact from fiction, and uncovering why his journey still has fans talking years later. Ryan's early life and passion for painting. Ryan Evans didn't exactly grow up with a clear path to becoming one of the most recognizable custom painters on television. He was born in Mount Vernon, Illinois, into a military family, which meant his early years were filled with constant changes and plenty of moving around. The family lived in different places around the world before finally settling in Killeen, Texas. Now, for most kids, that kind of lifestyle could feel disruptive. But for Ryan, it opened doors to new experiences. By the time he was old enough to explore hobbies, he had already picked up the resilience and curiosity that come with adapting to new environments again and again. It was in his parents' garage in Texas where things really began to take shape. While other kids were busy hanging out at the mall or glued to video games, Ryan found himself fascinated by anything mechanical. He tinkered with tools, disassembled small machines, and experimented with paint just to see what would happen. Airbrushing, which he discovered through trial and error, became his real obsession. With no formal teacher at first, he relied on self-teaching and endless hours of practice. Mistakes weren't setbacks. They were lessons. Friends later recalled how Ryan would disappear for hours into that garage, only to come out covered in paint dust, but with a grin that showed how much he loved what he was doing. Texas, especially in the 90s, had a thriving car culture that could inspire just about anyone with a creative streak. Hot rods with roaring engines and candy-colored paint jobs were always rolling down the highways, while lowriders with intricate murals cruised through neighborhoods and turned every block into a car show. For a kid with an eye for detail and a love for art, that environment was like living in a museum of moving canvases. Ryan soaked it all in. By the time he was a teenager, he was already experimenting with flames that licked across fenders, bold pinstripes that demanded attention, and layered colors that gave vehicles depth and personality. His designs weren't just paint. They were statements. By the mid-90s, Ryan's reputation was starting to grow locally. He painted for friends, took on side jobs, and word spread quickly that he was the guy who could transform an ordinary ride into something unforgettable. But Ryan had bigger dreams than staying in one place. In 1996, when he was about 23 years old, he decided to pack up and head west to Los Angeles, the ultimate hub for anyone serious about breaking into the custom car scene. It was a leap of faith, and like a lot of artists trying to find their way, he didn't land in luxury right away. Los Angeles in the late 90s was buzzing with creativity. Shops like West Coast Customs were just starting to build reputations that would later make them household names. Custom paint and bodywork were becoming more than just a craft. They were turning into pop culture, with music videos, car shows, and even the early days of reality television showcasing these designs. For Ryan, this was the perfect environment to push his limits. He hustled through odd jobs to keep the lights on, but always made sure to carve out time for his art. He experimented with candy paints that shimmered under sunlight, metallics that gave vehicles a futuristic edge, and wild graphics that made people stop and stare. Legends like Von Dutch, known for pioneering pinstriping, served as inspiration. But Ryan didn't just copy. He added his own flavor, blending timeless pinstriping techniques with modern twists. His style evolved into something recognizable, clean, bold, and somehow both classic and edgy at the same time. Friends from that period often described him as relentless. He wasn't the type to call it a night after a long day. Instead, he'd retreat to dimly lit garages, music blasting in the background, and keep working until the early hours of the morning. It wasn't just about making money, it was about chasing perfection. Every design was a chance to outdo the last one. And just when it seemed like Ryan might stay grinding in that underground scene forever, fate nudged him towards something bigger. In 1999, Shannon Ico, the bike builder at Count's Customs, caught wind of Ryan's talent. Shannon, already working at Danny the Count Coker's famous shop in Las Vegas, knew Ryan's skills were exactly what the team needed. Count's Customs had already built a reputation for restoring classics and customizing rides for rock stars and collectors, but they were missing a painter who could elevate their projects to the next level. That was Ryan's chance, and while he couldn't have known it at the time, this move would not only change his career, but also make him a familiar face to millions of fans around the world. Joining Count's Customs and the rise of Ryan. By the late 1990s, Ryan's years of experimenting with paint, hustling in Los Angeles garages, and building a name for himself finally started to pay off in a way he couldn't have scripted. Around 1999, Ryan crossed paths with Shannon Ico, a talented bike builder who had already made a name for himself at Count's Customs in Las Vegas. Shannon immediately recognized Ryan's potential, his eye for detail, his ability to blend classic techniques with modern styles, and the relentless way he kept pushing his craft forward. He encouraged Ryan to come out to Vegas and join the team at Count's, which at that point was already buzzing thanks to the vision of its larger-than-life owner, Danny the Count Coker. Now, Count's Customs wasn't just another garage. It sat a little off the Las Vegas Strip, and it already had a reputation as a hot spot for custom builds, especially since Danny had such strong ties to music and television. Rock stars, collectors, and even local celebrities were stopping by, looking to have their cars or bikes transformed into one-of-a-kind pieces. For Ryan, this was exactly the kind of environment he needed: loud, creative, competitive, and full of opportunities to prove what he could do. When he first started at Count's, Ryan was mostly focused on painting. But it didn't take long before people realized he wasn't just another painter who could lay down a clean coat of candy apple red. Ryan had a knack for conceptualizing designs from the ground up, sitting with Danny and brainstorming wild ideas that blended artistry with attitude. His ability to think beyond the basics made him stand out. Before long, he became more than just an employee. He was the shop's creative engine, the one who could take Danny's big-picture vision and make it a reality on metal. Those early years were no walk in the park, though. The shop was hectic, deadlines were constant, and the work was physically and mentally draining. Ryan was so committed to the job that he even lived upstairs at the shop for about a year during the early filming days, practically immersing himself in the chaos 24/7. Imagine spending all day in a place filled with welders buzzing, engines roaring, music blasting, and then crashing out just a floor above it. That was Ryan's life. Inside the paint booth, Ryan's tools of choice became an extension of his hands. He leaned heavily on his favorite airbrushes, particularly Ernest Iwata models, because of their precision and reliability. Over the years, He mastered techniques that most painters only dream of perfecting, like detailed silver leaf application, which he's still showing off in his more recent projects, even as late as 2025. Every design that left his booth wasn't just a paint job. It was art, with layers of technique, color, and storytelling. Then came the big turning point. In 2012, the History Channel launched Counting Cars, a spin-off from the wildly popular Pawn Stars. The show opened the doors of Count's customs to the world, and suddenly Ryan wasn't just a behind-the-scenes painter. He was on national television week after week, showing audiences exactly what he could do. The show ran for 10 seasons, covering 184 episodes until 2021, and during that entire run, Ryan was front and center as the shop's lead painter. Fans quickly noticed how his calm, laid-back style contrasted with the shop's overall high-energy vibe. He wasn't the loudest guy in the room, but his presence always anchored the chaos. His back and forth with Horny Mike became a highlight of the series, with one particular line, "F off, Mike," becoming so iconic that it's still quoted by fans years later. And of course, his designs spoke for themselves. Whether it was the fiery flames on a 1957 Chevy or the intricate graphics he laid on custom choppers, Ryan's work consistently stole the spotlight. But as the cameras kept rolling, life didn't stop outside the shop. Off-screen, Ryan was juggling fame and family. He had married Dana Pauly, and together they were raising their son, Logan. Away from the spray guns and deadlines, Ryan was a surprisingly low-key family guy. He loved spending time with his family, doted on his cats, and kept a soft spot for his dream car, a 1969 Chevelle, which carried a lot of sentimental weight tied back to his early days of falling in love with cars. The television exposure catapulted Ryan into the spotlight, making him one of the most recognizable faces in custom car culture. But fame always comes with its own challenges, and by the time Counting Cars wrapped in 2021, whispers of tension and trouble were starting to circulate. What exactly was going on behind the shop's doors? That's where the story starts to take a turn. Ryan's big builds and the tensions that followed. If you've ever watched an episode of Counting Cars, you know Ryan wasn't just another guy in the background with a spray gun. His style became the soul of the show. Every project that rolled out of Count's Customs had his fingerprints on it. Whether it was a small detail that most people might miss on camera, or a full-blown, head-turning custom job that made fans pause their DVR just to get another look. One of his most talked-about creations was the 1973 Boat-Tail Riviera. Ryan didn't just repaint this car. He transformed it into something that looked like it belonged at an art exhibit. The design included silver leafing, layered candy paints, and colors that shifted in the light, which helped it stand out at SEMA in 2015, where it actually won the Airbrush Action Best in Show award. For fans who followed Ryan's journey from the garage days in Texas to that moment, it felt like validation that his artistry had reached the top level of custom car culture. Another fan favorite was the Tron-inspired 2013 Camaro. This wasn't just a simple paint refresh. Ryan used futuristic paints and glow effects to give the car a neon-lit video game vibe that felt like it had rolled straight out of a movie. Viewers loved it because it showed how far he was willing to push the boundaries of what automotive art could look like. And then there was that bold purple and green Chevy van with flames, one of those vehicles that didn't just turn heads but made people smile, because it was so different. What made Ryan unique was the way he worked behind the booth. He wasn't just relying on the shop's energy or the cameras rolling. He was deeply methodical about his process. He used tools like Lift King rigs to handle heavy panels on his own, saving time and protecting the paintwork. He was also known for his pinstriping skills, a dying art in some circles, but something Ryan kept alive with his own twist. If you've seen him at industry events in recent years, even as late as 2022, he still pulled crowds to watch him do live demonstrations, showing that he wasn't just TV famous, he had the real skill to back it up. Of course, no reality show would be complete without drama, and Counting Cars had its share. Inside the shop, personalities sometimes clashed. Scott Jones, who had been a key figure in the early seasons, left after season 3 and moved back to Tennessee, which left fans speculating about behind-the-scenes tension. Then there was the much-publicized situation in 2016 with accountant Joseph Frontiera, who was accused of embezzling money from the business. While that scandal created plenty of negative press around Count's Customs, Ryan himself stayed clear of it and focused on what he did best: painting. Off-camera, he was building his reputation in other ways too. He started collaborating with magazines like Cartoons in 2022, which was a full-circle moment since those publications had inspired him back in his early days. He made appearances at shows like the Platte River Car Show in 2023, where fans lined up to meet him, get autographs, and hear firsthand about his creative process. These events showed that his popularity wasn't just a product of being on TV. People genuinely respected his work. But like all long-running shows, Counting Cars eventually came to an end after its 10th season in 2021. The official explanation was tied to network changes and shifts in programming. But fans noticed that there were also growing whispers about internal tensions, budget cuts, and maybe even disagreements about creative direction. Ryan, who had become such a recognizable face of the show, suddenly had to navigate life without the weekly platform that had showcased his work to millions. And this is where things get a little murky. As the cameras stopped rolling, rumors started to spread. Some about accidents that might have slowed him down, others about personal struggles, and still more about whether he had been fired or left by choice. The truth, as with most stories tied to reality TV, isn't always straightforward. So, what exactly happened to Ryan? Heartbreaking tragedy of Ryan? Rumors, facts, and the truth revealed. If you've spent any time on forums, you've probably run across wild claims about Ryan from Counting Cars. Some of them get repeated so often that people start to believe them, even though when you actually look closer, the stories fall apart pretty quickly. The first rumor, and honestly the one that probably makes the rounds the most, is that Ryan passed away or was involved in some tragic accident. Now, that's the kind of claim that really spreads fast online because it plays on people's emotions. But here's the thing: if something that serious had really happened, it wouldn't be tucked away in comment sections or random blogs. Major outlets would report it. Car magazines would cover it. And the custom automotive world, which is a pretty tight-knit community, would absolutely be talking about it. Instead, if you look at actual updates from Count's Customs, you'll find Ryan still showing up in the booth, airbrush in hand, posting photos of new paint jobs, and even sharing behind-the-scenes tips about his process. That alone clears away a lot of the noise around this rumor. The second story that pops up from time to time is that Ryan was tied to money problems or even theft. This one gets messy because it usually circles back to an incident from 2016 involving Joseph Frontiera, who worked as an accountant at Count's Customs. Back then, Joseph was accused of taking company funds and using them for personal purchases, including money that allegedly went toward buying his own car. It became a big deal, led to legal issues, and brought a ton of attention to the shop. But here's the important detail. Ryan had nothing to do with it. He wasn't crunching numbers in an office. He was in the paint booth, doing what he does best. Despite that, years later, the story keeps resurfacing in ways that unfairly connect Ryan's name to it. It's one of those examples of how internet gossip can get tangled up and drag in people who were never involved. Now, the third rumor, and one that sounds a little more believable at first, is that Ryan was fired when Counting Cars wrapped up. But once again, the facts tell a different story. The show came to an end in 2021, after 10 seasons and 184 episodes. That's a huge run for any reality series, and by that point, networks were changing direction, moving away from long-running spin-offs like Pawn Stars and trying out fresh concepts. The ending wasn't about Ryan being pushed out or drama behind the scenes. In fact, Count's Customs never shut down, and Ryan never left. He's still part of the shop today, working on projects that fans don't always get to see on TV anymore, but are still happening. Even Danny Coker has gone on record in interviews as recently as this year, saying that Ryan remains one of the most valuable creative forces in the shop. As of August 2025, Ryan's applying silver leaf to projects, per shop posts. The shop hosts tours and events like the Chevy C10 Nationals, drawing crowds. Ryan books appearances, sharing airbrushing tips at conventions. His legacy? Inspiring artists worldwide. From a garage kid in Texas to a TV star, Ryan proves passion pays off. Reboot rumors for Counting Cars swirl, but for now, he's painting masterpieces in Vegas, serving clients from collectors to celebrities. His work continues to shine, as seen in recent shop videos. Like if you're Team Ryan, and leave a comment about your favorite build. Do not forget to subscribe for more untold stories, and check out the next video on your screen. Thanks for watching.